So hello everybody. My name is Dawn Nguyen, and I'm chair of the IRB committee this year. So we would like to introduce about IRB, some myths and facts, and the application procedures. I would like to invite Eric to share with us the first part of our presentations.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So yeah, so the IRB would like to present a few slides to sort of acculturate the rest of our colleagues about the work we do together with you to make sure that both our students and faculty, even staff, have a successful voyage through the Institutional Review Board, and that we are friends, not foes in the process. So that's the myth versus facts. So Do you want to next? So the IRB essentially is an administrative body to establish and protect the rights and welfare of human research participants. It also is charged with the responsibility of reviewing, prior to its initiation, all research involving human participants. Next slide. So who are we? We're representatives of all the schools. We also have external members that periodically sit with us. Many IRB members are also researchers, and we do our own research, which we then bring through the IRB. Sometimes consultants are needed in the process, which we then bring on. And then the IRB, I think, especially being a faculty composition body, understands the challenges of conducting research. You know, having a external grant given to you, a deadline, recruiting your participants and subjects, all the accoutrements that go along with your IRB process, we're sensitive to, and we want you to be successful. Next slide. So our meetings are not secret, and there's no investigators allowed. That's a myth, is that a myth? No, it's not. It's a reality. Any investigator can attend. You have to make an appointment. Normally we meet. We'd only meet weekly during the semester. You must declare any conflicts of interest, and also we should know that. You must agree to keep everything that is heard confidential, because we operate much like the personnel committee. There's a lot of sensitive information that goes back and forth. And investigators are also asked to meet with the board to explain aspects of their research or the appeal board decisions that are also open to individual researchers who might feel that our decision was made capriciously or unfavorably, but you have an absolute right to have face time with the decision makers in the IRB process. Next slide. And here I'll turn it over to my colleague, Joy.
All righty. So people often think, well, when do I need to go to the IRB? When do I not? And so you go, well, my study's so simple, I'm just doing X. But allow the IRB to determine that. Next slide. And really the criteria are there human subjects involved, and does it meet the definition of research? So if it meets the definition of research in the sense that we are going to disseminate this information to an audience in terms of presenting it as a learned outcome, then it does need IRB approval. Or if you're involved in human subjects research, and so that means anytime you collect data, even archival data, that involved human subjects, it does need to go through IRB approval. The one exception there is that if an instructor or student is using in-class surveys that are used solely for a class project or for in-class data. So for example, in my statistics courses, I had the students fill out a questionnaire about their favorite colors and their GPA and their major, and we use that data just to go through examples of statistics and analyses. So something like that would not need an IRB approval. But anytime you're collecting information on human subjects outside of that, then consider it as something that needs to go through IRB. Next slide. And then the assessment of risk. This is one of the questions we asked on the IRB form. And just an FYI for everyone that we are currently working on an extensive revision of the IRB application process, and we're moving to a fillable form format that hopefully will simplify the process for everyone. But this idea of risk and being able to determine whether or not your study has risk, many times people say, well, you know, I'm not actually experimenting on people, but risk is kind of inherent in the research process. Next slide. And that's because anytime you're using human subjects or you're studying people, just the risk of making people feel judged or uncomfortable by being studied is considered part of risk. Anytime you can ask questions that people might think there is a judgment call to it, or that you are analyzing them in some way, or that there's a right or wrong answer. So it's not just physical harm that we look to when we're assessing risk, it's also psychological harm or discomfort. There are other risks that may not seem like inherent to your project, but also are always involved in human subjects research. And that is something like a loss of confidentiality. If you bring in people, accidents can occur, people can fall, people can trip, people can get hurt on things. And then there's also a risk associated with the relationship you have with the people you're studying. So for example, if you're using students in your research, well, are you a professor for the students? Do you have power over their grades? Or are you studying colleagues, and do you have a superior role to any of those colleagues that you're studying? And so those are things that would also be looked at in measuring risk. And finally, in the question of whether or not you're receiving funding is irrelevant in terms of whether or not you need to apply for an IRB. If you are receiving funding, that's additional information that you would fill out on the form, but it does not determine whether or not you need to go through IRB. So funded and unfunded studies all need to go through IRB if they meet the criteria of research or human subjects.
Okay, so thus we invite you to go submit your applications to IRB approval. But there's a myth that if you cannot think about your research proposals, just send it to IRB, then IRB will figure it out. The fact is IRB just make sure that we protect the human participants. We don't do the research design for the researcher. So when we read the applications and we feel that the researcher don't know exactly what they want to do, that will sign a form to approve the research. So please submit the application with well-thought research design. And it's rarely a study to get approval the first time, but it's also rare for study not receive IRB approval. Usually it's just in the form of deferrals. It means the IRB committee needs to make sure that you follow standard of care, protect the human participants. So if you get feedback from IRB, just don't give up. You can meet with IRB committee member to discuss about the request for resubmissions letter that the IRB committee feedbacks to your applications. You can write appeal to the IRB committee. And we created a checklist on SharePoint under work file IRB folder that provide the application form, provide all the material you need to submit for IRB application. This includes the lay language summary of your research that everybody beside your field can understand, we provide different forms of consent, informed consent forms that you need to have your research participants sign. We have the recruitment, you need to submit the recruitment contact materials, any questionnaire or measurement that you use for your research, and the funding sources if you get funding. So here's the link to the SharePoint, and if you have any questions, please contact us either through the IRB email at Woodbury, or the second one is my email. So thank you for listening. And again, it's related to the potential legal issues if faculty or students do research related to human objects and not go through IRB. So we're here to help go through with you through the process. Please remember us IRB if you conduct any research related to human participants.
Does anyone have any questions?
So it might be helpful just to recap when the IRB process is required. That I think was presented, but it might be helpful to just mention it again.
Sure. So I think that was back on like slide 7. So the idea here is basically, does your research, oh, there you go. Does your research involve humans? And is it considered research, right? So is it a dissemination of information or a collection of information on humans? And anytime it involves those two things, then it is considered necessary to complete IRB. And this is for faculty, for staff, and for students as well.
Also, would you like Wendy to present her research, even though she just collected information on social media, that archival data, but it's still related to humans. So that's required IRB too.
And we didn't present here, but there are different levels of IRB. There's a full review of IRB when we consider that the risk level is above minimal, and that's when you're using, for example, vulnerable participants. If you're involved in some sort of drug study or medical study, which not too much going on here at Woodbury, but something like that. So the more invasive or invasive that the research is, that would be considered a full IRB. There's an expedited level, which most of us fall into if we're not using vulnerable participants. And there are certain projects that may meet an exemption level. And so the IRB, the chair of IRB, can help with all of that.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and just mention that we're the thin blue line or the thin red line, depending on your politics, that separates the Department of Education from coming after a university for its IRB fudging, which could take away funding that the government gives a particular university if subjects are harmed during the process of research. So there have been cases where universities have been defunded because their IRB was lax and it was proven in court. So think of us again as friends, allies, cheerleaders, but at the same time we have to be enforcers. And I think that secondary matter is something that we take very, very seriously and onerously, because it is to protect Woodbury's reputation. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we still have more time if anyone has any questions about IRB, or we could take any questions about the presentations and the presenters, but we just have about 5 minutes. So actually, I could read if there are any questions. You could enter them into the chat in YouTube, but right now I don't see any coming up. I just see a lot of congratulations. So with that, I would like to just say thank you again to everybody who presented today, and really great to see everyone's work. And we look forward to seeing you guys back on campus soon. And, you know, we're continuing everybody's fantastic research. Thank you so much to everyone.